Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Katie's Garage. Today I'm going to be showing you how to repaint a fender on your car using no specialty tools and things that you can pick up locally from your auto parts store. So stay tuned. Step 1 to painting a fender is to remove the fender. Step 2, make sure to wash it using some nice dish soap and some warm water. Step 3, get out your random orbital sander and some 240 grit or 320 grit depending on your panel and get to sand. Okay, so every single little spot like this that you can see with your naked eye, you know, there's a divot there. I sanded out like this. It's important to make sure you're getting all of these little divots. It's just really important to make sure that you're feathering your edges as much as possible. If you can feel an edge with your finger, it's definitely going to show in your paint. And all of this kind of stuff where it's still shiny, all of that has to come off. But once you are done prepping your panel, you are going to want to scuff any shiny pieces with sandpaper or a red Scotch pad. Okay guys, it is a new day, as you can probably tell from my different clothes, and I chopped my hair off. What I am doing is, after I just finished the 600 grit, excuse me, I did 400 grit. 600 grit is optional if you want it a little bit smoother. I am going to hit it with these gray finishing pads. They didn't have any red ones locally, so supposedly this one is just a little bit less aggressive, so should still get the scuffing job done. I'll link it up in the description below, the red and the gray pads, if you want to do this on your project. So I'm going to finish up the scuffing and then we'll move on to the next step. Let's go ahead and go over the products that you're going to need for this next part. So here I have some black latex gloves. I'm also going to be using some cheap shop towels, but I also recommend that you use a microfiber or something instead. You're going to want some wax and tar remover to get rid of any oils. And then these are the two different primers that I'm using, but please make sure that you actually get the same of each primer, same color at the very least, because you're going to see that this is probably a mistake using two different colors. And then finally I have a tack cloth here, which is great for grabbing any dust before you spray. The first thing we're going to do before we start spraying our primer is to wipe down the entire panel with wax and grease remover. After your wax and grease remover dries, go ahead and use a tack cloth to pick up any dust. Since this is an older panel, I'm going to go with a filler primer as my primer of choice. When you start spraying, make sure that you start with the edges first and then work your way to the main face of the panel. Right about here, my primer started running out and going really dry, so then I ended up having to use a different color, and it's not ideal. Try to use the same color. Alright guys, so I definitely thought that one can of primer was going to be enough for a fender. Obviously it wasn't. So I started off with a filler primer and then I ended up doing a sandable primer. And that's just because this is what I had at my house. So I went from gray to black. I am spraying this panel black for the base coat. My dog wants me to throw her ball. So you are going to need 2 cans probably for a fender at a bare minimum. The other thing I was really struggling with was these cans don't like being sprayed like this. So you'll notice in the video that it starts to kind of look dry and like kind of textured. And I think that's because more air than paint was coming out of these cans from holding it this way. So that is another downside of using cans. It probably would work fine if you had a panel on the car and were painting it, but with it off like this, it says you can spray it at any angle, but I honestly didn't think that they worked that good, especially as I got down to maybe having a quarter to a third of a can left. Now I'm gonna let this finish drying, and then I'm gonna go ahead and wet sand with a 600 grit and get it smooth before I do a base coat. So using the 600 grit wet sandpaper, I'm just going over the entire panel and feeling it out by hand until I feel the panel is smooth. And I also use the water to look for any texturized spots that need more sanding. Yeah, before I keep going, I'm going to go over a few things that I'm pretty sure are going to be mistakes. The number one mistake that I can see that I made was with the primer. So when I was spraying this panel, it was flat like this. The primer that I bought said it could be sprayed at any angle. However, as the paint started getting lower and lower, it started getting really dry. So it was spraying more air out than paint, and it created this really rough surface that I then had to go through and wet sand. Now, on top of that, I did a gray base primer and then thought that one can would be enough, and it wasn't even close. So I had to grab another can of primer that I just happened to have sitting around, which was a black primer. And because so much air was coming out of them, it really didn't cover all that great. So I have at least the bare metal spots covered and most of the red, but as you can see, as I started wet sanding with my 600 grit, it started burning through really fast. So you can see spots of gray all over, and even on some of the high spots, I've got a tiny bit of red peeking through. This isn't ideal. You want your panel to be one solid color of primer. So my recommendation for you is to buy at least 3 cans of the exact same color primer. Let's go ahead and start spraying and see how it turns out. For the painting and finishing portion, you're going to want your wax and grease remover, a tack cloth, some rags, and a respirator. Super important. You're really going to want a respirator, especially with the 2K clear. Then you've also got the perfect match paint, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later after we do this first coat. Alright, let's start painting. So same as with the primer, you want to start on the edges, and when you're painting, you actually want to make sure that it's laying down pretty wet, but you don't want to go so slow that you cause runs. So try to find a good balance in speed, and you want to go off the panel with the paint all the way to the other side and off the panel again. Like, this prevents you from hitting it with that spray that just leaves a massive run. So I always start and stop off of the actual panel. Make sure you're paying super close attention, getting all the edges, all that good stuff. Being an outside paint job with limited tools, this really is looking pretty good. I'm seeing a little bit of debris and a little bit of lint left over from my towel, unfortunately. But for the most part, this looks like it's going to really turn out pretty nice. I am going to let this fully cure. I do have 2K clear coat, which I'll show you guys what I'm using and where you can get it, because you can't just buy it from any store. And you are going to want 2K clear coat instead of like the regular stuff that you can get from a home improvement store or even your local AutoZone. So let's go ahead and chat a little bit about picking out a paint. Keep in mind though, nothing's going to be a perfect match because there's even like slight gradients in each paint job. So to really get a true match, you need to have it blended professionally unless you're really good and can do it yourself. I just picked up this Duplicolor Perfect Match, and how I picked this was I put in my year, make, and model of my car and chose the paint code, which this was the only black paint code for Toyota in 1990, so it was really easy for me to pick the right one. And then you can see right on here it says duplicates original Toyota colors. And I got 2 cans of this, and that seems to be enough to cover this whole fender, so I did 3 coats. Now we are going to let this finish setting, and then I am going to go ahead and get that clear coat out and show that to you guys. So be right back. This is what I used, or what I am going to be using for the clear. So this is an actual, I guess I don't need to hold both cans. This is an actual 2K 2-part clear. So a lot of them at like Home Depot or any of those stores will have 2X. So don't get it confused. It is not the same thing. So you want a 2K clear, and how you can tell it's a 2K is it'll have this little thing on the bottom that you need to take this part of the cap off and activate it. This is like a true clear coat that like they would be spraying on your car if you were getting a paint job redone. So this stuff lasts longer, and it has better UV protection, and you can wet sand it and not be scared about doing that. Really high gloss. This is a really great quality clear coat. So this is a Spray Max 2K, I get to focus, clear glamour clear coat. Alright guys, here we have it. So this is immediately after I finished painting the 3rd coat. You can see some debris in the paint, unfortunately. The wind happened to kick up right as I was finishing up that 3rd coat. So there will be debris. It's bound to happen when you are spraying outside. For the most part, it turned out really shiny. It's not even finished setting here yet, so I think in the end it ends up looking even shinier. There's a little bit of orange peel, as you can see, but overall this turned out really well for an outdoor rattle can paint job. What do you guys think? That's all I have for you guys. Thanks for watching Katie's Garage. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. If you liked it, let me know. If you didn't like it, maybe you could keep that to yourself, or I'll accept constructive criticism, I guess. But I hope that you learned something from today's video, from my mistakes. See you next time. Save those dragons.